They say a person breaks only once. For me, it happened the night my own family laughed at me like I was a burden they were forced to drag along. The jokes weren't loud, but the humiliation was. And when I heard my name, Penelope Hart, used as the punchline to a story that wasn't even true, something inside me tore clean in half. I didn't walk out because I was weak. I walked out because, for the first time, I realized the people who should have protected me were the ones who enjoyed watching me shrink. I just didn't know that night would be the beginning of everything that came after, including the moment a man in uniform stepped forward, looked at me, and addressed me with a title none of them ever imagined I carried. I stood outside La Fonda Hotel in Santa Fe, letting the high desert air slip along my collar like a quiet warning. The adobe walls, glowing in warm amber light, looked almost alive, exhaling slowly in a way that made my hesitation feel exposed. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag, not from the cold, but from the familiar weight settling in my chest. My sister's retirement party was supposed to be a simple family event, yet I lingered outside longer than I wanted to admit. Through the jazz drifting from the lobby, I spotted the familiar faces' relatives. My parents, my sister laughing as if the years had never held a single sharp word or careless wound. Their voices mingled with the clink of glasses, an easy warmth that had never belonged to me. The distance I felt wasn't measured in steps, but in memories where I'd been edged out of conversations, expectations, and belonging. When I finally stepped inside, color and movement washed over me. Navajo patterns stretched across the walls. The buffet shimmered with heat. Wine caught the light like small flames. A few people waved, polite and almost welcoming. Yet their courtesy felt like a thin sheet laid over something colder. And then came the glances, quick, assessing, circling the space beside me before returning to my face. I had come alone. In my family. That was always the wrong answer. I steadied my smile, drawing from years of practiced calm. The night opened gently, but beneath the quiet, old fractures stirred subtle, sharp, and impossible to avoid for long. I hadn't even settled into my seat when my aunt appeared beside me, her smile bright in a way that felt more rehearsed than welcoming. "Penelope, you came by yourself." Her voice carried warmth, but her eyes flicked over me with the precision of someone inspecting something long forgotten. The quick sweep made me pause, a small hitch in my breath. I recognized that brand of concern too well, sweet on the surface, sharpened underneath. Before I could answer, my cousin Lorraine pulled out the chair next to mine and sank into it with an exaggerated familiarity. "Busy these days," or "no one could make it with you." It sounded casual enough, but years of similar comments echoed behind it, each one needling the same tender place. They never meant harm, or so they insisted. But repetition has a way of carving grooves into a person. One question was mild. A dozen stung. Years of them hardened into something more permanent. I finally sat. Ed lifted his glass toward me with a polite nod. "Pen, long time. Your sister mentioned you're doing some office stuff now. Must be a pretty easy schedule." "Right?" The tone was harmless, but the assumption was familiar. They had already decided who I was and what my life amounted to without ever asking me directly. I gave a small practiced smile, an expression worn so often it felt more like armor than friendliness. They loved narrating my life for me. They rarely asked for the truth. The table buzzed with overlapping conversations, but beneath the chatter lingered that thin layer of judgment, questions that sounded polite but carried something heavier, something that grew dense in the space between us. I braced myself for the usual discomfort, the quiet sting I had learned to carry. Then it came. A young cousin at the far end, barely out of college, absorbed in his phone, murmured just loud enough for me to catch. "Mom said Aunt Pen just does paperwork all day. Bet it doesn't pay much." My head lifted instinctively, across the room. Miriam laughed freely with friends, unaware or unconcerned that she had planted the story now being repeated as fact. Oddly, anger didn't rise. Instead, a cold line traced down my spine, settling deep. In that moment, something became painfully clear. My family didn't dislike me. They simply needed me to stay small so they could feel larger. I offered a thin, steady smile, the last defense I had left. Inside, another quiet wound opened. Their conversations carried on kids getting into college, mortgage upgrades, promotions, and I lifted my water glass without joining in. I didn't belong in those comparisons, and they had no interest in understanding the world I actually lived in. Their laughter floated around me, loud and bright, but I felt as though I were sitting beside a life that had never made room for me. My phone buzzed, a short vibration. Deliberate. Standing by outside. Situation evolving. Need your authorization. Captain Hart. The words snapped through me. I turned the phone face down, my hand steady, though my pulse jumped. It wasn't fear, it was the timing. A message from the life they didn't know existed, arriving at the exact moment they were discussing who among them held the real responsibilities. I breathed in slowly. The phone buzzed again. Sharper this time. Whatever was unfolding outside wasn't going to wait. And in that moment, the invisible divide between who they believed I was and who I truly was began to shift. Two realities inching toward collision. I set my glass down. Miriam's voice cut lightly across the table. Still on your own? Pen. No one. With you yet? She didn't finish. She didn't need to, because deep in my chest, I felt something change, quiet, certain. Tonight would not end the way they expected. Something outside those hotel doors was moving toward us, and none of them had any idea what was coming. I tried to focus on the salad in front of me, but the air around the table had thickened into something heavy and close. Everyone was chatting, yet every sentence seemed pitched just loud enough for me to hear the parts meant to sting. The clatter of silverware rose and fell with the light. Careless laughter that tightened my chest more than I wanted to admit. Lorraine leaned back, her tone light, her smile even lighter. Pen, she always chooses to stay on the outside. With a personality like that, who could stay with her long? A few heads lifted from their wine glasses, nodding in quick agreement, as if they'd only been waiting for someone to voice what they'd been thinking for years. The comment pulled me backward, straight into the old years when even my smallest quirks were labeled strange. Inconvenient. Difficult. My ribcage tightened, memories rushing in like cold water. I pushed my chair back, ready to escape for air. When it happened, the server stumbled. A full glass of red wine splashed across my dress, deep crimson blooming across the fabric. The gasp around the table was brief, quickly replaced by a low chuckle. Oh boy, tonight really isn't her night, Ed remarked, grinning as if the spill revealed something fundamental about me. I looked down at the stain and dabbed it slowly with a napkin. I could handle the wine. What I couldn't bear was the mixture of pity and amusement in the eyes around me, people who claimed to love me. I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. I refused to give them the satisfaction of watching me walk away defeated. Then Mark leaned back in his chair, voice raised just enough for nearby tables. So, I'm doing okay this year, or still struggling? The word landed like a slap. He was referring to the tax documents Miriam had snooped through years ago, and he wanted an audience, he always did. Heat surged up my spine. I straightened, forcing calm into my posture. None of them knew the things I'd done, the operations I'd coordinated, the medals I'd earned. They didn't know because they weren't allowed to, and they never cared to look deeper. Across the table, Miriam's lips curled in a small, eager half-smile, as if she were watching a show unfold exactly the way she'd scripted it. Then another voice, behind me, quiet but sharp as a blade. Penelope Hart. Alone again. Always alone. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. The words struck hard, aimed to turn my solitude into proof of my inadequacy. I set the napkin down, rose, and murmured, I need a moment. Eyes followed me probing, waiting, hungry for the spectacle of my reaction. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. They simply watched. What I didn't know was that my time enduring this was about to end. The moment the lobby doors swung shut behind me, the cool air hit my face, sharp and sobering. I stepped toward the dark leather chairs lining the hall and caught my reflection in a tall mirror. My expression remained composed, But my eyes told another story, tired, strained, carrying fractures I had held together for too long. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up instantly. "We've arrived. Staying out of sight. Awaiting your signal. Captain." My pulse quickened. No one in the lobby looked my way, but I knew what that message meant. My team was near, and they only came close when circumstances demanded it. I rested a hand against my temple. I'd come tonight to keep the peace, to avoid creating waves, but the world I truly belonged to had never cared about convenient timing. When I returned toward the banquet room, I walked directly into Mark's voice. He was telling the table about a friend who couldn't hold a job. But as I approached, he finished loudly. "Sounds just like Penn. Still can't get anything steady at her age." Laughter broke around the table. Miriam didn't correct him. She added, almost cheerfully, "She's so private that everyone assumes she's lost." I walked past them, unseen or deliberately ignored, and a realization dawned with painful clarity. Every effort I'd made to protect them from worry had only given them more material to tear me down. I turned to leave for good heavy. Hollow but a gentle hand closed around mine. An older woman, someone I didn't know, whispered, "Penelope, they're wrong. You deserve far more than this." Her eyes held none of the coldness I'd grown accustomed to. I opened my mouth to thank her just as the lobby doors burst open behind us. Footsteps steady, purposeful, echoed through the hall. I knew that cadence instantly. My heart lurched, not in fear, but in certainty. My two worlds were converging, and once they met, nothing would ever be the same. The cold Santa Fe air slipped under my collar as I stood beside the revolving door, feeling the weight in my chest settle like sand. Tonight wasn't simple exhaustion. It was the slow drain of holding myself together after every cutting remark at that table. Each breath dragged, thick with what I hadn't said. My hand brushed the phone in my coat. I meant to text my team, tell them I needed a moment before stepping into whatever demanded my attention tonight. But then the door spun again. 3 men in black suits entered, their steps sharp on the terracotta floor. I recognized the precision immediately. My world, not this one. They headed straight for me, stopping with perfect protocol. "Ma'am, standby location secured." One said quietly. A chill ran deeper than the wind. They weren't allowed inside unless the situation had escalated. My family just feet away still laughed, unaware. But I knew whatever had been simmering needed me now. "Give me a minute," I said. "Yes, Captain." The title landed hard. I wasn't just a relative at a dinner anymore, I was someone they needed. And I couldn't hide from that. I moved toward the door, but Mark suddenly slammed into my shoulder, wine splashing onto my shoe. "Wow, didn't know standing alone was hazardous." He joked, the mockery deliberate. I looked at him, really looked. Something in my expression made his grin drop. He stepped back, uneasy. I didn't answer. I walked past him. From the corner of my eye, I caught Miriam watching, her face tight with something close to fear, not of me, but of the version of me she didn't recognize. I headed for the front entrance. That was the moment everything shifted. I stepped down the 3 adobe stairs and saw them lined along the walkway, 3 black SUVs, engines running, headlights slicing through the night like a spotlight on a truth I could no longer hide. The first door opened. Dalton stepped out, silver ceremonial cord catching the light, his posture unmistakably authoritative. Every step he took announced that he was here on official business, and that business was me. Before I spoke, the revolving door behind me spun again. Relatives poured outside, mid-laughter, until they saw Dalton approach and stand at full attention. "Captain Hart! Ma'am, your transport is ready." The entire lobby behind us fell silent. Someone dropped a glass. A whisper followed Captain. Captain who Dalton didn't turn. "Ma'am is needed at Albuquerque International. Command has been waiting." Miriam appeared in the doorway, her face drained. A relative stammered. "What does she do?" Dalton finally looked their way. "She outranks everyone standing here." The silence thickened. Mark stepped forward. "Pale, Penn, you're military." Dalton answered, unwavering. "She's Captain Hart, Federal Air Security Corps." Gasps, shock, and then a whispered, horrified confession. My God, what have we done? Their expressions regret, disbelief, fear blurred into one. Dalton waited beside me, steady and patient. My two worlds didn't merely touch tonight. They collided loudly, brutally, and with the kind of truth no one in that doorway would ever forget. I stood on the stone steps outside the hotel, the Santa Fe night brushing cold across my face, the kind of chill that made everything feel sharper, truer. Behind me, the warm gold lights of the lobby stretched my shadow long across the red tile. Like every year I'd folded myself small beneath their judgment was being pulled out into the open. In front of me stood Dalton, posture straight, uniform crisp, a silent marker between the life I lived and the version they'd always assumed I inhabited. And just behind us, my entire family clustered in the doorway, silent, stunned, barely breathing. Dalton dipped his head slightly. "Ma'am, command confirmed. Your briefing is waiting at base. Immediate departure recommended." His voice rang out clean and metallic, slicing through the night. Someone behind me sucked in a breath sharp. Panicked. I opened my mouth, but Miriam stepped forward first. Her voice shook. Captain, Emla, Kezive." Before I could answer, Dalton turned toward them. Calm as stone. "Ms. Hart is a decorated federal officer. She has coordinated multiple national security operations. If she hadn't been where she was, many Americans wouldn't be alive today." Then he finished, sharper than any accusation they'd thrown at me for years. "She's not here because she needs your validation. She's here because she still believes in doing the right thing." Silence collapsed over them. No excuses, no laughter, just the weight of everything they'd never bothered to see. My father pressed a hand to his chest, not in pride, but in disbelief. He finally understood I had grown far beyond the small version of me he'd kept in his mind. Someone whispered behind him, voice cracking. "We spent our whole lives looking down on someone who protects the entire country. The truth had spoken. I didn't have to." I turned to Dalton. "Let's go." And for the first time in years, I walked away without looking back. Dalton opened the door of the first SUV, the soft cabin light spilling over the black leather seats like an invitation into a world both familiar and foreign. I placed my hand on the frame, ready to step in, but something pulled me to turn back. My family stood clustered in the hotel doorway, frozen beneath the golden glow. For a moment, time stretched thin, quiet, almost weightless. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned out long ago. What I felt now was distance, a kind of clean, quiet separation, as if the people staring at me belonged to a life I'd long since shed. They looked small from where I stood, strangers dressed in memories that no longer fit. Miriam stepped forward, voice trembling. "Pen, chi kumbit, chi tung." Her words cracked apart before they fully formed, an apology built from years too late. I met her eyes, steady and unforced. "You don't need to explain." I stayed quiet because I thought it was better for everyone. But I've learned silence lets people build the wrong story about you. The words didn't echo because no one dared breathe. No excuses, no defenses, just the heavy understanding that they had crossed a line for years without noticing. I continued, calm but undeniable. "I never talked about my work because I couldn't, but I never imagined you'd use that to diminish me." A few faces faltered, regret flickering like weak light behind their eyes. Real, but too late to matter. I didn't want more from them. Not clarity, not remorse, just closure. "You don't need to believe in what I do," I said softly. "You just need to stop judging what you don't understand." I nodded, a small gesture that felt like releasing a lifetime. Then I stepped into the SUV. The door closed, sealing out the faces I once tried so hard to please. Dalton remained silent in the front seat, offering respect the way my own blood never had. As we drove away, their figures shrank in the window-blurred silhouettes swallowed by hotel lights until they disappeared entirely. It wasn't just a ride. It was the line between who I had been and who I refused to be again. Santa Fe's night unfolded along the windows as the SUV moved forward. A ribbon of warm gallery lights, old adobe houses, and street lamps gliding past in long golden strokes, each glow slipping across my face, felt like another memory peeling away, leaving behind a quiet, weightless space inside my chest. The high desert breeze seeped through the seams of the car, carrying the dry scent of dust and old timber familiar. Grounding, almost cleansing. I let my head rest against the seat and drew a deep breath. This time, it didn't snag on old wounds or tighten with the instinct to defend myself. It moved freely, unburdened. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to justify my choices, swallow insults, or shrink to fit someone else's comfort. It felt like stepping out of a room I hadn't realized was suffocating me until the door finally opened. I was simply myself, whole, steady, and no longer hidden. No more masks built from fear. No more dread of who might twist my silence into a flaw. Freedom arrived quietly between heartbeats, filling the space my family's expectations once occupied. Dalton caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. "You okay, Captain?" His question held no pity, only understanding from someone who'd watched me walk through a battlefield none of them could name. I smiled. The kind that belonged entirely to me. I've never been better. As the SUV merged onto the highway, streetlights stretched into clean, steady lines guiding me away from everything that had drained me for so long. A small shooting star crossed the dark sky swift, bright, fleeting. I followed its arc and understood freedom isn't always leaving what hurt you. Sometimes, it's the moment you stop needing their understanding altogether. I leaned my head against the glass, eyes closing as Santa Fe settled into a soft, familiar hush. A chapter of my life had closed, firmly, quietly, forever. And the woman riding into the night was no longer burdened, only free.